The Crimson Oak Club had a rule nobody talked about. If Kang Jae-sung looked at you twice, your life was about to change. Usually for the worse. Gabriella Sullivan had worked there for 8 months and never broken that rule. She kept her head down, her section clean, and her interactions with the special guests non-existent. Tonight, that was about to become impossible. It was December 22nd, exactly 2 days before the Christmas Eve gala, where 7 of New York's most powerful women would descend on the club with one singular mission: make Kang Jae-sung notice them. These weren't just rich women. These were heiresses who owned diamond mines, CEOs who controlled billion-dollar empires, socialites who could destroy careers with a single phone call. And right now, all 7 of them were in Gabriella's section. She could feel their eyes tracking her like predators watching prey. Designer gowns that cost more than her annual salary. Jewelry that could pay off her student loans 3 times over. Perfume so expensive, it probably had its own security detail. Victoria Chen sat at the center table, a diamond heiress with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. She snapped her fingers without looking up from her phone. Waitress, champagne, the 1990 Dom Perignon, not whatever cheap substitute you people usually pour. Gabriella's hands didn't shake as she wrote it down. They couldn't. Shaking meant weakness, and weakness in this place meant you got eaten alive. Right away, ma'am. Just get through tonight, she told herself, heading toward the bar. 2 more days until the gala, then they'll all be focused on him, and you can go back to being invisible. That's when the entire club went silent, not the polite kind of quiet, the dangerous kind, the kind where even the kitchen staff stopped moving. Gabriella turned. Kang Jae-sung had just walked in. He moved like violence in a $15,000 suit. Black fabric tailored so perfectly it looked like it was part of his skin, flanked by bodyguards whose faces could have been carved from stone. His presence didn't fill the room. It owned it. Every single one of the 7 women straightened in their seats. Lipstick was checked. Hair was touched. Predatory smiles activated. Gabriella did what she always did, looked away, and kept moving. Survive. Be invisible. Get your paycheck. She was 3 steps from the bar when it happened. A champagne tray, a distracted moment. A collision that would shatter her entire world. Her shoulder hit something solid, not a wall, not a table. A person. The tray tilted. 6 crystal champagne flutes worth $300 each began their slow-motion journey toward the floor. And Gabriella looked up into the coldest eyes she'd ever seen. Kang Jae-sung caught her wrist before the glasses fell. His grip was gentle, but absolute, like being held by someone who could break bones without raising his voice. Careful, he said in perfect English, accent barely there, voice low enough that only she could hear. Those glasses are worth more than your weekly pay. Behind him, 7 women stopped breathing. Gabriella had just done the one thing they'd all been desperately trying to do for months. She'd made Kang Jae-sung stop. Before we continue, because what happens next is brutal, I need you to do something. If you're watching this and you're not subscribed yet, that honestly hurts. I spend hours crafting these stories for you, and if you don't subscribe, YouTube won't show you what happens when Victoria tries to destroy Gabriella, or when Jae-sung makes his move. You'll miss the ending, and I don't want that for you. Hit subscribe right now. It's free, takes 1 second, and means you'll never miss a moment. Comment where you're watching from. Texas? London? Manila? I read every single one. Now let's get back to Gabriella's story, Because what Victoria does next will make your blood boil. The Venetian's lobby gleamed like a cathedral of excess, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers that threw prismatic light across imported Italian tile. Gabriela Reyes had exactly 47 seconds to deliver Mr. Chen's espresso to the Skyview suite before her shift supervisor started timing her bathroom breaks again. She rounded the corner at full speed, silver tray balanced perfectly despite her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor, and slammed directly into what felt like a marble statue wearing Tom Ford. The espresso cup performed a graceful arc through the air. Time slowed just enough for Gabriela to watch 300 degrees of Arabica perfection trace a liquid parabola toward a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. She lunged, catching the cup mid-flight, but physics had other plans. The remaining coffee splashed across pristine wool and onto leather shoes that could have financed her sister's quinceañera. "Oh my God." Gabriela grabbed napkins from her apron, already calculating the cost of this disaster. The suit alone was easily $5,000. The shoes, another $2,000. Her entire year's salary wouldn't cover the dry cleaning. "I am so sorry." She looked up. The man staring down at her didn't look angry. He looked confused, like he'd just witnessed a mathematical impossibility. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp features that belonged on Korean dramas her mother binged at night. His dark eyes tracked her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Please, let me—" Gabriela was already on her knees, dabbing uselessly at his shoes. The coffee had soaked through everything. She was fired. Absolutely, completely fired. And probably sued. Could they garnish wages for ruining a suit? "I'll pay for the cleaning, You caught the cup." Gabriela froze, napkin pressed against Italian leather. "What?" "Mid-air. You caught it." His voice carried the faintest accent, each word precisely measured. "Interesting reflex." She sat back on her heels, looking up at this strange man who should have been screaming for her manager by now. I waitressed through college? You develop reflexes." He tilted his head, studying her like she was a specimen under glass. "You're not apologizing correctly." What?" Gabriela blinked. "I literally just apologized." "No." He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. This close, she could see the coffee soaking into fabric that probably required some specialized European cleaning process. "You apologized to me. Not at me. You made eye contact. You didn't grovel. Should I be groveling?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but something about his clinical assessment made her spine straighten. "Look, I said I'm sorry. I'll pay for everything, but I'm not going to prostrate myself on the lobby floor for your entertainment." Something flickered in his expression. Not anger. Something almost like delight? "Everyone grovels." He stood, pulling out his phone. Gabriela's stomach dropped. He was probably calling security, or his lawyer, or both. "The staff here has been trained to treat me like visiting royalty. They bow, they scrape, they perform elaborate theatrics of apology for infractions far smaller than this." "Congratulations?" Gabriela climbed to her feet, gathering her scattered napkins. Her hands were shaking, but she refused to let him see. "You want a medal for being treated special?" He lowered his phone, and for the first time, something like a real expression crossed his face. A smile. Small, but genuine. "What's your name?" "Gabriela Reyes." She stuck out her chin. "And before you ask, yes, I know I just destroyed a suit worth more than my annual salary. No, I don't have the money to replace it. but I'll work out a payment plan or whatever legal thing you need me to. I'm Kang Jae-sung." He said it like she should recognize the name. When her expression remained blank, that smile grew. "You don't know who I am." "Should I?" "Most people do." He gestured vaguely at the casino floor beyond them. "I own 40% of this property, and the payment plan won't be necessary." The world tilted slightly. Gabriella gripped her tray tighter. "You own the Venetian?" 40%, he corrected. "The Palazzo Group holds controlling interest. I'm merely the largest individual shareholder." He brushed at his ruined jacket with surprising unconcern. "And you just assaulted me with overpriced coffee." "I didn't assault. It was an accident." "Was it?" Those dark eyes studied her again with that same unsettling intensity. "You weren't performing. Just now when you apologized. You weren't acting. You were just real." Gabriella had absolutely no idea what to say to that. Behind her, she could hear her supervisor's voice calling her name with increasing irritation. The espresso for Mr. Chen was now 20 degrees cooler and completely wrong. Jae-sung pulled out a business card, pressing it into her palm. His fingers were warm against her cold ones. "I want to see you again, Gabriela Reyes." "Why?" "Because you're the first person in this entire building who's treated me like I'm actually human." He stepped past her, ruined shoes squeaking slightly against the marble. "And I find that absolutely fascinating." Chapter 2. The Empire of Loneliness. Jae-sung stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a kingdom he'd conquered but never truly owned. 43 floors up, and somehow the height made everything below seem small, insignificant, including himself. His phone buzzed for the 7th time in an hour. He didn't need to look to know it was Min Ji, his executive assistant, with another stack of contracts requiring his signature. Or perhaps it was Director Park, eager to discuss the merger that would crush another competitor. Or maybe, probably, it was Yeon Hee, his girlfriend of 6 months, texting about which restaurant they should be photographed at this weekend. None of them mattered right now, because all he could think about was a pair of terrified brown eyes looking up at him from a spilled tray of broken glass. 3 days. It had been 3 days since the incident at Moonlight Terrace, and Jae-sung couldn't shake the memory. He'd built an empire on reading people, on knowing exactly what they wanted before they opened their mouths. Investors wanted returns. Competitors wanted surrender. Women wanted status, money, access to the life his name could provide. But that waitress, Soo Jin, he'd learned from the restaurant's owner after a discreet phone call, she'd wanted nothing except to disappear. The honest terror in her expression had struck him harder than any boardroom betrayal. She hadn't seen an opportunity. She'd seen a threat. And wasn't that the truth of it? Wasn't that what he'd become? His reflection stared back at him from the window's glass, superimposed over the city light. 32 years old. Net worth in the billions. 0 real friends. His father had warned him once, back before the old man's mind started slipping. Power is the loneliest currency you'll ever trade in. Jae-sung had thought it was dramatic nonsense at the time. Now he understood. The office door opened without a knock, the only person with that privilege. His cousin Min Jun strolled in, loosening his tie, looking like he'd just closed another deal that would make their shareholders ecstatic. "You're brooding again," Min Jun said, dropping into the leather chair across from Jae-sung's desk. "It's the waitress, isn't it?" Jae-sung didn't turn from the window. "I fired my last assistant for being too observant." "You fired him for embezzling, but nice try." Minjun crossed his legs, studying his cousin with the same analytical precision they both applied to business. You haven't stopped thinking about her since it happened. You called the restaurant. You paid for the damages even though it was clearly not her fault. You asked about her well-being 3 times. She was injured because of my reputation. She was injured because some social climbing narcissist couldn't handle rejection. Minjun leaned forward. But that's not why you can't stop thinking about her, is it? Jae-sung's jaw tightened. His cousin knew him too well. The curse of growing up together, of building this empire side by side. She looked at me like I was a monster. And everyone else looks at you like you're a god, or a bank account. Which is worse? The question hung in the air between them. Jae-sung finally turned from the window, moving to his desk where a crystal tumbler of whiskey sat untouched. He'd poured it an hour ago, but even the burn of expensive liquor couldn't distract him tonight. Yeonhee posted another photo of us at that charity gala, he said, deflecting. Her engagement ring hashtag collection is getting creative. Minjun snorted. She's been planning your wedding since the second date. Meanwhile, you can't remember what color dress she wore last weekend. Navy, or black, something dark. It was red. I know because she cornered me for 20 minutes explaining why red projects confidence at networking events. Minjun's expression softened, losing its teasing edge. When are you going to admit that relationship is as fake as her eyelashes? It's mutually beneficial. She gets the status and connections she wants. I get someone to bring to events so the board stops questioning your personal life, Minjun finished. That's not a relationship, cousin. That's a business arrangement with dinner reservations. Jae-sung downed the whiskey in one burning swallow. And the alternative is what? Dating someone who actually sees me? Who knows what I'm capable of? He thought of Soo Jin's face again, that moment of raw fear before she'd scrambled away from him. People should be afraid. It keeps them honest. Or it keeps you alone. The words hit harder than Minjun probably intended. Jae-sung set down the empty glass, his fingers drumming against his desk, the only outward sign of the restlessness eating at him from inside. The waitress, he said quietly. Soo Jin. Find out everything about her. Minjun raised an eyebrow. Everything? Where she lives? Where she works? If she has family, debts, dreams? Jae-sung met his cousin's knowing gaze. I need to understand why she looked at me like that. Or maybe, Minjun said, standing, you just need to understand why it bothered you so much that someone finally saw you clearly. The first time Gabriella saw Jae-sung after the gala, she nearly dropped her tray. He sat in her section at Le Bernardin, occupying the corner table that cost more per meal than she made in a week. His security detail had taken positions at adjacent tables, trying and failing to look like ordinary diners. The maitre d' had personally escorted him, whispering frantically into his radio about the arrangement. Gabriella approached with practiced composure, her hands steady despite the recognition flickering in his eyes. Good evening, sir. May I start you with something to drink? Gabriella, he said, butchering her name with his accent, but somehow making it sound intimate. I request you specifically. Her stomach dropped. I'm sorry, sir. I think you have me confused with... No confusion. He slid a business card across the white tablecloth. His card embossed with the Choi Holdings logo. On the back, handwritten in precise letters, Gabriella Reyes, Le Bernardin, Tuesday. Saturday, 5:11 p.m. I do my research. The implications of that sentence, that he'd hunted down where she worked, memorized her schedule, arranged this entire reservation around her shifts, should have terrified her. Instead, Something dangerous fluttered in her chest. "I'll give you a moment with the menu," she managed, retreating before he could see her hands shake. She lasted 3 days before he appeared again. This time he brought associates, serious men in $1,000 suits who discussed mergers in hushed Korean while Gabriella refilled water glasses. But Jae-sung's attention never strayed to the conversation. His eyes tracked her movements across the dining room with the focus of a predator selecting prey. When she presented the check, he didn't glance at the total. He simply added a tip that made her breath catch. $2,000 on an $800 meal. "Sir, this is too much. You earned it." His fingers brushed hers as he signed the receipt, the contact brief but electric. "Your service was exceptional." The way he said that last word suggested he wasn't talking about the Dover soul. It became a pattern. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Like clockwork, Jae-sung materialized in her section, sometimes alone, sometimes with business associates who clearly resented dining at his convenience rather than theirs. He ordered expensive wines he barely touched, entrees he pushed around his plate while watching her work. And the tips. God, the tips. 1,500, 3,000. Once, inexplicably, $5,000 for serving him a single course. "You can't keep accepting this," Maria hissed in the kitchen, eyes wide at the receipt. "This isn't normal, Gabby. He's buying something." "He's buying food," Gabriella snapped. But they both knew that was a lie. The money went straight to her mother's medical bills, to the treatment plan that might give them 6 more months. She couldn't afford principles. She couldn't afford to question why a billionaire had developed an obsession with watching her work. The conversations started small. Just pleasantries while she poured wine, professional exchanges that gradually lengthened into actual dialogue. "Where did you learn English?" he asked one Thursday, his Korean associates deep in heated discussion about semiconductor tariffs. "Night school? Community college before I had to drop out." She shouldn't be telling him this. Shouldn't be engaging. "You speak it very well yourself." "Boarding school in Connecticut. Very boring. Very cold." A slight smile. "Not like Venezuela." She froze. "I never told you where I'm from." "I told you. I do my research." He leaned back, studying her with unnerving intensity. "Caracas, yes? You came here at 16 with your mother. Father stayed behind. You worked 3 jobs to put yourself through nursing school until—" He paused delicately. "Until your mother got sick." The invasion of privacy should have enraged her. Instead, she felt oddly exposed, seen in a way that made her skin prickle. "That's not appropriate dinner conversation, Mr. Choi." "Jae-sung," he corrected. "And you're right, I apologize." But he didn't look remotely apologetic and, "Tell me something I don't know about you instead." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. His smile turned sharp. "Because you interest me. Because I'm very rich and very bored, and you're the first interesting thing I've encountered in months." He gestured at the opulent dining room with casual disdain. "This, all of this, is performance, theater. But you're real." "I'm your waitress," she said flatly. "For now." The promise in those 2 words made her pulse spike. By the 3rd week, she'd stopped pretending she wasn't watching the door on Tuesdays and Thursdays, stopped pretending her heart didn't jump when she saw him walk in. The tips had become absurd. 7,000, 9,000, once a cool 10,000 that she'd stared at for 5 full minutes before finally depositing. She was being bought. Slowly and systematically. She knew it. He knew she knew it. And God help her, She was starting not to care. The bass from inside Velvet Noir still rattled the brick walls when Jae-sung pushed through the back exit at 2:17 a.m. He needed air. Needed to escape the smell of expensive cologne mixing with cheaper desperation, the fake laughs of men pretending their money made them interesting. He hadn't expected to find her there. Gabriella sat on an overturned milk crate, still in her serving uniform, but with her heels kicked off beside her. A half-eaten gas station sandwich rested on her lap. She looked up when the door opened, eyes widening before she scrambled to stand. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone. I'll go back inside, I just needed—" "Sit." Jae-sung let the door close behind him. "You're on break." She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself back down. Her shoulders remained tight, ready to bolt. He recognized that posture. He'd worn it himself enough times. The alley smelled like rain and garbage, a sharp contrast to the manufactured luxury inside. Jae-sung leaned against the opposite wall, pulling out his cigarettes. He offered her one without speaking. "I don't smoke." She watched him light up. "Bad for the lungs. Can't afford to get sick." "Smart." He exhaled toward the sky. "How long you been working here?" 3 months. Her fingers picked at the sandwich wrapper. "Why?" "Because you look like you're waiting for something terrible to happen every time someone walks through a door." Gabriella's jaw tightened. For a moment he thought she'd throw some polite deflection, give him the kind of sanitized answer employees gave their bosses. Instead, she surprised him. "You grow up poor enough. You learn terrible things don't announce themselves. They just happen. Someone gets deported. Electricity gets shut off. Your brother gets jumped walking home." She met his eyes. "You prepare for everything. Hope for nothing." The raw honesty hit him harder than expected. Jae-sung took another drag, studying this girl who served champagne to men who'd never known hunger, who smiled through their wandering hands because rent didn't pay itself. "My father used to say the same thing," he found himself saying. "Except in our house, the terrible things had names, creditors, rivals, men with guns and long memories. The ivory serpents. It wasn't a question." Jae-sung's hand stilled halfway to his mouth. "What do you know about them?" "I clean tables, empty ashtrays. People forget servers exist." She shrugged. "I hear things. Your name comes up a lot. Usually right before someone gets very quiet or very drunk. And you're not scared? Sitting alone in an alley with the son of a crime boss?" Gabriella looked at him for a long moment. Really looked. Not the way the club girls did, calculating his worth. Not the way his father's men did, measuring his threat level. Just looked, like she was solving a puzzle. "You came out here because you needed to breathe," she said finally. "Just like me. People who need to escape their own buildings aren't the ones I'm scared of." Something in Jae-sung's chest loosened. When was the last time someone had seen him as just tired? Not dangerous, not powerful, not the heir to violence and money, just exhausted. "3 jobs," he said, remembering what Yuki mentioned. "This one, and what else?" "Grocery store in the morning, cleaning offices at night." She took a bite of her sandwich, chewed, swallowed. "Used to be 4, but I had to drop the weekend catering. Couldn't keep the schedule." "You sleep?" "Tuesdays, usually." A ghost of a smile. "What about you? Being a crime prince must be exhausting." "Crime prince," Jae-sung laughed, the sound bitter. "I'm a puppet in an expensive suit. My father pulls strings, I move. He says jump, I ask how high. He says marry a stranger to secure a weapons deal, I show up at the altar." The words escaped before he could stop them. He never talked about this. Not with Yuki, not with anyone. But something about this alley, this girl, the 2 a.m. honesty that came from shared exhaustion, it unlocked something. Gabriella watched him. The engagement everyone's whispering about. You don't want it. I don't want any of it. The clubs, the empire, the blood money. He dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his heel. But men like my father don't build dynasties by asking their sons what they want. No, Gabriella said quietly. They build them on the backs of people they never see. The servers, the cleaners, the girls sending money home to families they can't afford to visit. Their eyes met across the alley. Two people from opposite worlds, both trapped. His cage gilded with champagne and violence. Hers built from necessity and disappeared paychecks. You're different than I expected, Jae-sung said. So are you. She stood, slipping her feet back into her heels with a wince. My break's almost over. Gabriella. He didn't know why he said her name. Didn't know what he wanted to say next. She paused at the door, looking back at him. In the dim alley light, she looked impossibly young and impossibly old at the same time. Same time tomorrow? She asked. Jae-sung nodded. Same time? The door closed behind her, leaving him alone with the bass beat still rattling the walls and the strange sensation that something fundamental had just shifted. The break room fell silent the moment Gabriella walked in Tuesday morning. 3 housekeepers, Maria, Consuela, and young Petra, huddled near the lockers, their whispered conversation dying mid-sentence. They exchanged loaded glances, the kind that made Gabriella's stomach tighten. What? Gabriella asked, reaching for her cleaning cart. Do I have something on my face? Maria, the oldest of the group at 52, shook her head slowly. Her weathered hands gripped her coffee cup like a lifeline. You don't know, do you? About Mr. Kim? Gabriella's pulse quickened. She thought of Saturday night. The garden, his confession, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. What about him? He's not just rich, Mija. Consuela's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He's dangerous. My cousin worked at his Seoul headquarters 5 years ago. She said people who cross him, they disappear from the industry. Careers gone overnight. Petra nodded vigorously, her eyes wide. I heard he bought out an entire hotel chain just to fire one executive who embarrassed him at a board meeting. The man ended up working at a car wash. Gabriella felt heat rising to her cheeks. That's just gossip. You don't know. We know he's been watching you. Maria's tone turned sharp, almost maternal. The whole staff knows. And those women, those vultures, they know too. As if summoned by the conversation, Gabriella's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her open the message. The photo loaded slowly, deliberately. It showed her and Jae-sung in the garden Saturday night. His hand on her waist, their faces inches apart. The angle was perfect, professional. Someone had been watching. The text came next. Emergency meeting. Rooftop garden. Noon. Come alone, or this goes public. Gabriella's hands trembled. I have to go. Don't, Maria warned. Whatever they want, it's not worth... But Gabriella was already moving, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had 3 hours until noon. 3 hours to decide if she was brave enough or stupid enough to face whatever was waiting. The morning crawled by in agonizing slow motion. Every room she cleaned felt like a prison. Every minute that ticked past brought her closer to a confrontation she couldn't imagine. At 11:45, she stripped off her cleaning gloves, smoothed her uniform, and headed for the rooftop. The garden looked different in daylight, less romantic, more exposed. 7 women waited in a semicircle near the fountain where Jae-sung had first kissed her. They looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, Designer dresses, perfect hair, jewelry that probably cost more than Gabriela's annual salary. The woman in the center, a striking Korean woman in her early 30s wearing a crimson dress that screamed wealth, stepped forward. Her smile was all teeth and no warmth. "So you're the maid." Her English was flawless, tinged with an accent that suggested expensive international schools. "I'm Minseo Park. My father owns the largest shipping conglomerate in Asia. These are my friends." She gestured lazily at the other 6 women. "We've all known Jae-sung since childhood. We've all been groomed, prepared, bred to stand beside him." Gabriela lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. "Then why isn't he with any of you?" Minseo's smile sharpened. "Because he's bored. Men like Jae-sung, they don't marry for love. They marry for dynasty, for power, for the merger that will make their empire untouchable. You're a distraction, a phase, something he'll forget the moment his father reminds him what's at stake." Another woman stepped forward, blonde, American, dripping with diamonds. "Do you know what happened to the last nobody who tried to trap him?" "She claimed she was pregnant. His lawyers buried her so deep she moved to another continent." "I'm not trying to trap anyone," Gabriela said, but her voice wavered. "Doesn't matter." A third woman, Indian, impossibly beautiful, examined her manicured nails. "The media will eat you alive. They'll dig into your family, your past, every mistake you've ever made. By the time they're done, you'll wish you'd never met him." Minseo pulled out her phone, swiped through photos. More images from Saturday night, from other moments Gabriela hadn't even realized they were being watched. "We could release these today. TMZ would pay 6 figures. Your face would be everywhere, the gold-digging maid who seduced the billionaire. Your family in Colombia would see it. Your mother would read what they say about her daughter." Gabriela's breath caught. They'd researched her. They knew about her mother, probably knew everything. "Or," Minseo continued, her voice turning honey-sweet and poisonous, "you walk away. Quietly. Request a transfer to another property. Disappear from his life. We'll make sure you get a generous severance, enough to send your mother to the best doctors in Medellin, enough to change your family's life." The offer hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and tempting all at once. Gabriela thought of her mother's medical bills, the crushing weight of poverty that had followed her across continents, the logical choice that any sensible person would make. Then she thought of Jae-sung's eyes in the moonlight, the way he'd said her name like a prayer. "No," Gabriela whispered. Then louder. "Stronger! No!" The ballroom fell into a hush so absolute that Gabriela could hear the crystal chandeliers trembling overhead. Every head turned toward the entrance, where a woman stood framed in golden light like a deity descending from Olympus. Victoria Chen. Even her name tasted expensive. She moved through the crowd with the fluid grace of a panther, her midnight blue gown clinging to her body like liquid sapphire. Diamonds glittered at her throat, wrists, and ears, not the modest sparkle of wealth, but the aggressive glare of empire. Her black hair was pulled back in a severe chignon that emphasized razor-sharp cheekbones and eyes that could appraise a diamond's value or a woman's worth with equal precision. Gabriela's stomach dropped. She recognized predatory elegance when she saw it. Victoria wasn't just wealthy. She was weaponized wealth, the kind of woman who'd been bred in boardrooms and raised on quarterly earnings reports. "The diamond heiress," Aunt Rosa breathed beside her, and Gabriela heard something she'd never detected in her aunt's voice before. Fear. Chen Diamond Corporation. Her family controls 40% of the world's diamond trade. They say she appraised her first stone at age 7 and negotiated her first $1 million deal at 16. Victoria's gaze swept the ballroom with surgical precision, cataloging and dismissing faces with the efficiency of a supercomputer. Then those dark eyes locked onto Gabriella, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The heiress's lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a less dangerous face. On Victoria Chen, it looked like a death sentence written in red lipstick. She began moving through the crowd, and bodies parted before her like the Red Sea before Moses. Women who'd been chattering moments before fell silent. Men straightened their ties and tried not to stare too obviously at the fortune draped across her collarbone. "Aunt Rosa," Gabriella whispered urgently, "should we—" "Stand your ground," Rosa hissed back. "Never show weakness to a predator." Victoria stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Gabriella could smell her perfume. Something rare and crushing, like orchids being crushed under diamonds. The heiress tilted her head, studying Gabriella with the clinical detachment of a jeweler examining a potentially flawed stone. "So," Victoria said, her voice like silk wrapped around steel, "you're the maid." The word hung in the air like a slap. Around them, Gabriella could feel the other guests leaning in, hungry for blood. "I'm Gabriella Torres," she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. "And you must be Victoria Chen. I've heard impressive things about your family's business." How diplomatic. Victoria's smile sharpened. "And how utterly transparent. Tell me, Miss Torres, do you know the difference between a diamond and cubic zirconia?" The question felt like a trap. Gabriella's mind raced. "Diamonds are formed under extreme pressure over millions of years. Cubic zirconia is manufactured in laboratories." "Exactly." Victoria stepped closer, invading Gabriella's personal space with calculated aggression. "One is real. One is artificial. One has value that endures. One is merely decorative." Her eyes traveled deliberately over Gabriella's dress, lingering on every seam with surgical disdain. "Some things can be polished and placed in pretty settings, but they'll never be more than clever imitations." Heat flooded Gabriella's cheeks. She wanted to step back, to flee, to disappear into the crowd. But Rosa's words echoed in her mind. "Never show weakness." "Then I suppose it's fortunate," Gabriella said quietly, "that I'm not trying to be a diamond. I'm quite comfortable being exactly who I am." Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. For one breathless moment, Gabriella thought she'd gained ground. Then Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. How quaint, how refreshingly naive. She turned to address the gathered crowd, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have entertainment tonight. A maid who thinks she belongs at the table with billionaires. How deliciously absurd." The words detonated like grenades. Laughter rippled through portions of the crowd. Nervous, cruel laughter that made Gabriella's skin crawl. She saw Charlotte's sympathetic wince from across the room, Isabella's barely concealed smirk, and worse, the calculating gleam in several other women's eyes as they realized Victoria had just declared open season. But it was Alexander's face that stopped her heart. He stood near the champagne fountain, his expression unreadable, and for one terrible moment their eyes met. She waited for him to intervene, to defend her, to do anything. He turned away. The betrayal hit harder than Victoria's words. Gabriella felt something crack inside her chest, felt the humiliation spread like ice through her veins. Victoria leaned in one final time, close enough that only Gabriella could hear. "You don't belong here, little maid. And before this week is over, I'll make certain everyone, including Alexander, sees you for exactly what you are. A temporary distraction in borrowed clothes. She swept away, leaving Gabriella standing alone in a sea of judgmental faces, the weight of her inadequacy pressing down like the millions of years of pressure that forged Victoria's precious diamonds. Gabriella's hands trembled as she shoved clothes into her worn duffel bag. 2 weeks' notice be damned. She couldn't stay another day. Not after last night. Not after she'd let herself imagine, even for a second, that a man like Jae-sung Park could see her as anything more than convenient. The morning sun cut harsh lines through her studio apartment's single window, illuminating the water stain on the ceiling she'd stopped noticing years ago. This place was real. The cracked linoleum, the radiator that clanged at 3 a.m., the neighbor's television bleeding through paper-thin walls. This was her world. Jae-sung's penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and silence so complete you could hear your own heartbeat. That was fantasy, and she'd been a fool to let the lines blur. She'd left a resignation letter on the kitchen counter this morning, brief and professional. Personal reasons. Effective immediately. No forwarding address. Her phone buzzed for the 14th time. She didn't need to look to know it was him. "Stop calling," she whispered to the empty room, zipping the bag with finality. She'd crash with Maria in Queens until she found something new. Anything new. She'd scrub toilets in a highway motel if it meant putting distance between herself and the ache in her chest every time Jae-sung looked at her like she mattered. 3 sharp knocks shattered her resolve. Gabriella froze. Her apartment building required a buzzer for entry. No one just appeared at her door unless... "Gabriella." His voice carried through the thin wood, low and strained. "I know you're in there." Her heart stopped, then kicked into overdrive, pounding so hard her vision blurred. "Go away." "Not until you talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about. I quit. You'll have a new housekeeper by Monday." Silence stretched between them, thick enough to suffocate. Then, "Open the door." "Please." That single word, please, from a man who commanded boardrooms and bent industries to his will, nearly broke her. She crossed the cramped space and yanked the door open, keeping the chain latched. Jae-sung filled the narrow hallway, looking completely out of place in his tailored charcoal suit among the peeling wallpaper and flickering fluorescent lights. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. His eyes held something raw and desperate that made her chest constrict. "How did you even find this place?" she demanded. "Your employment file." He stepped closer to the gap. "Why did you run?" "I didn't run. I resigned. Without notice, without explanation." His jaw tightened. "After last night, nothing happened last night," she cut him off, her voice sharper than intended. "You were drunk and sad, and I was there. That's all." "I wasn't that drunk." He pressed his palm against the doorframe. "And you know that's not all this is." Gabriella's laugh came out bitter. "What is this, exactly? You think because I bring you tea and listen to your problems that somehow we're—" She shook her head. "I work for you. Worked. Past tense. You think I don't know that?" Frustration bled into his tone. "You think I haven't tried to convince myself that's all it is? That you're just efficient and pleasant and make the apartment feel less empty?" He leaned in, his voice dropping. "But then you challenge me. You tell me I'm wrong. You don't want anything from me. Not my money, not my connections, not even my approval. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" "So I'm what? Refreshing?" The word tasted acidic. "Some novelty because I don't kiss your ass?" "No. He gripped the doorframe harder. You're the only person in my life who sees me. Not Park Industries, not the stock price, not the empire my grandfather built. Just me. The vulnerability in those words nearly undid her. Gabriella felt tears burning behind her eyes and hated herself for it. That doesn't change reality. You're you and I'm... What? He interrupted. You're what, Gabriella? Not good enough? Not worthy? His voice turned fierce. Because from where I'm standing, you're the only genuine thing in my entire world. Stop. She pressed her forehead against the door. Please stop. I can't. The admission came out rough. I've tried. God knows I've tried to keep this professional, to maintain distance, to pretend I don't wait for you to arrive every morning, like it's the only thing I have to look forward to. But last night when you left... He exhaled shakily. It felt like losing the only real thing I have. Gabriella's resolve crumbled. Her fingers moved to the chain, then hesitated. This is insane. We're from completely different worlds. I don't care about worlds. Jae-sung's eyes held hers through the gap. I care about you, and I hope, you might care about me too. Not the CEO, not the heir, just me. The chain rattled as she slid it free. The door opened, and suddenly there was no distance between them at all, just two people standing in a dingy hallway, both terrified, and both unable to walk away. This is a mistake, Gabriella whispered. Jae-sung's hand found hers, tentative and questioning. Then let's make it together. The Metropolitan Museum's Great Hall had been transformed into a winter wonderland that would make Versailles weep with envy. Crystal chandeliers dripped with diamond ornaments worth more than most people's houses. Ice sculptures of angels stood sentinel in every corner, their frozen wings catching the light from 10,000 white roses arranged in cascading displays that cost more per stem than Gabriella made in a month. She stood at the edge of the grand staircase in her borrowed Valentino gown, watching Manhattan's elite glide across marble floors like sharks circling prey. Women dripped in jewels that could fund small countries. Men wore tuxedos that cost more than luxury cars. The air itself seemed expensive, perfumed with wealth and power, and the kind of privilege that came from generations of never hearing the word no. This was Victoria's kingdom, and Gabriella was about to be sacrificed on its altar. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria's voice cut through the chamber like a blade wrapped in velvet. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, resplendent in a crimson Dior gown that looked like it had been sewn from liquid rubies. Every eye in the room turned toward her. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Thank you all for joining us on this most special Christmas Eve. Gabriella's hands trembled. She pressed them against the cool silk of her gown, trying to steady herself. Around her, she recognized faces from magazines, from news broadcasts, from the dark corners of Alexander's world. Politicians whose campaigns Alexander funded. Business titans whose empires he controlled. And others, men with hard eyes and expensive suits who carried the scent of violence beneath their cologne. Tonight, we celebrate not just the season, but the sterling legacy, Victoria continued, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. A legacy built on excellence, refinement, and the unwavering standards that separate the exceptional from the ordinary. The pause before that last word landed like a slap. Several guests glanced toward Gabriella. She felt their eyes like needles. As many of you know, my grandson Alexander has recently made some interesting choices. Victoria's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. We've all been young once. We've all made mistakes we later regret. Gabriella's chest tightened. Where was Alexander? She scanned the crowd desperately, but he was nowhere to be seen. Victoria had planned this perfectly, sent him away on some urgent business matter, leaving Gabriella exposed and alone. But the Sterling family, Victoria's voice grew stronger, more commanding, has always understood that some mistakes simply cannot be allowed to continue. That sometimes kindness means showing people exactly where they belong. A server appeared at Gabriella's elbow. Miss Rivera, Mrs. Sterling requests your presence on the stage. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but 300 pairs of eyes were watching. Alexander's entire world was watching. If she ran now, she'd confirm everything Victoria wanted them to believe, that she was weak, common, unworthy. Gabriella lifted her chin and walked toward the stairs. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea, their whispers following in her wake. She could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their barely concealed amusement at whatever spectacle Victoria had planned. Each step felt like walking to an execution. Victoria's smile widened as Gabriella climbed the stairs. Ah, there she is. Everyone, please welcome Miss Gabriella Rivera, the young woman who's been keeping my grandson so entertained these past months. The way she said entertained turned it into something dirty, something shameful. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Gabriella comes to us from such humble beginnings, Victoria continued, circling her like a predator. A cleaning woman, actually. Isn't that charming? She scrubbed Alexander's floors before she... Well, another meaningful pause, another wave of laughter. Gabriella's face burned, but she stood her ground, refusing to give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. I thought it would be educational, Victoria said, producing a small velvet box from seemingly nowhere to show everyone the difference between what's real and what's pretending. She opened the box. Inside lay a diamond necklace that could probably buy a small island, the kind of jewelry that represented everything Gabriella would never be, never have, never deserve in Victoria's eyes. This belonged to Alexander's mother, Victoria said softly, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. Worth approximately $43 million, the kind of treasure that belongs to women born to wear it. She held it up to Gabriella's neck without fastening it, letting it dangle there for a moment. The diamonds caught the light, cold and beautiful and utterly foreign against Gabriella's skin. You see? Victoria addressed the crowd, pulling the necklace away. Some people are born to wear diamonds. Others are born to clean the floors beneath them. No amount of borrowed gowns or fairy tale romance can change what you fundamentally are. She snapped the box shut with a sound like a guillotine falling. Merry Christmas, Miss Rivera. I do hope you've enjoyed your little adventure in our world. Consider this your notice. It's time to return to your own. The room erupted in applause. The room had gone silent, the kind of silence that comes when something unforgivable has just happened, and everyone knows it. Victoria stood frozen, the champagne still dripping from her manicured fingers, her expression caught between triumph and the dawning realization that she'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. Around them, phones were already coming out, cameras focusing, the Manhattan elite preparing to feast on the spectacle. Gabriella couldn't move. The cold champagne soaked through her uniform, plastering the fabric to her skin. She could feel every eye in the room on her. All those people who'd looked through her for years now seeing her. Really seeing her. In the worst possible moment. Her hands trembled as she tried to cover herself, tried to hold together what was left of her dignity. Then warmth enveloped her. Jae-sung had moved so fast she hadn't seen him coming. His tuxedo jacket settled around her shoulders, expensive fabric heavy and warm, smelling faintly of his cologne. His hands were gentle as he wrapped it closed, shielding her from the cameras, from the stares, from everything. "Don't look at them," he said quietly, his voice meant only for her. "Look at me." She met his eyes and found something there that made her chest tight. A fierce protectiveness that transformed his usually controlled features into something almost dangerous. The gentleman billionaire was gone. This was someone else entirely. He turned to face the room, one arm still around Gabriela, keeping her close. "Phone," he said simply. His assistant materialized instantly, pressing a device into his hand. Jae-sung didn't even glance at it as he dialed, his eyes sweeping across the frozen crowd with the precision of a predator selecting targets. "Marcus Chen," he said, when the line connected, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "The Whitmore Gallery acquisition we discussed? Cancel it, permanently. Yes, I'm aware Victoria Whitmore is the director. That's precisely why." Victoria's face went white. He was already dialing another number. "Jonathan? The Park Avenue development. I want the Whitmore Foundation's charity office space application denied. Immediately." A pause. "I don't care what commitments were made. Consider this a personal favor." Around the room, Gabriela could see the shift happening. The phones that had been aimed at her were lowering. The gleeful expressions were turning uncertain. Manhattan society was recalibrating in real time, trying to understand what was happening, what side of this they wanted to be on. Jae-sung made 4 more calls in rapid succession, each one precise, devastating, surgical. Gallery sponsorships withdrawn. Charitable partnerships dissolved. Social club memberships under review. He was dismantling Victoria's carefully constructed empire of influence piece by piece, right there in front of everyone, with the same calm efficiency he might use to review a quarterly report. "Stop," Victoria finally managed, her voice cracking. "Please, you can't. I can." Jae-sung's tone was almost pleasant. "I'm doing it right now. Would you like to watch me call the Met? I believe they're considering your application for the board." Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Around her, Gabriela could see her friends, the women who'd laughed at the champagne attack, subtly stepping away, creating distance, already abandoning ship. Jae-sung handed the phone back to his assistant and addressed the room. "Let me be exceptionally clear," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "Gabriela Martinez is under my protection. Anyone who touches her, speaks to her with anything less than respect, or makes her uncomfortable in any way will answer to me personally. And as you've just witnessed, I take that responsibility very seriously." The silence was absolute now. Gabriela felt like she couldn't breathe. "Furthermore," Jae-sung continued, "I want every photo, every video taken in the last 5 minutes deleted. Now. You have 60 seconds before I start making this uncomfortable for everyone in this room." The sound of people scrambling to delete files was almost comical. Phones appeared like magic, fingers frantically swiping. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of Jae-sung Park's displeasure. Not after what they'd just seen him do to Victoria. He turned back to Gabriela, his expression softening. "Can you walk?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good. We're leaving." He kept his arm around her as they moved toward the exit, and the crowd parted like water. The invisible waitress who'd spent years being walked past, ignored, treated as part of the furniture. Suddenly, she was the most important person in the room. Protected. Claimed. Untouchable. As they passed Victoria, Jae-sung paused for just a moment. "If you're still in New York by next week," he said conversationally, "you're braver than I thought." Then they were through the doors, leaving the chaos behind, and Gabriela realized with a strange, dizzy certainty that her life had just changed forever. The invisible waitress was gone. Whatever came next, she could never go back to being that person again. If you loved this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories. 5 lessons from this story. First, true power is shown not in how you treat your equals, but in how you protect those who cannot protect themselves. Second, dignity cannot be stripped away by champagne or cruelty. It comes from within and is recognized by those who truly matter. Third, public humiliation can backfire spectacularly when the wrong person is watching. Fourth, real influence isn't about social status or family name, it's about the relationships you build and the respect you command. And fifth, sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is swift, decisive action without hesitation or second guessing. See you in the next video.